blueberry zucchini bread, a healthy recipe makeover for you all today. Thanks for joining me for Ask Wardee. I'm really thrilled you're here. This question actually came from Gina. She said she sent me her zucchini bread recipe, and then I saw blueberries listed and I was like, whoa, I have to try that. But she said she wants to make it more healthy and also incorporate einkorn. So of course I said yes. And so we're going to talk through that recipe makeover today. Thanks everyone for joining me for Ask Wardee. This is the weekly show where I answer your questions about traditional cooking. And as you know, this week I'm answering Gina's to redo a recipe to make it healthy and incorporate einkorn. And Gina's going to get a free gift for submitting a question that I cover on the air. And so I'd like to extend that same offer to you. If you have a question, submit it for Ask Wardee, and if I answer it, you will get a free gift as well. The recipe and the transcript is ready for you right now. Anytime, askwardee.tv, look for episode 1, 2, 3, because that's today's episode, so you'll see the complete recipe and any links. Here we go. Let's get into the recipe makeover today. So Gina said, I have my favorite zucchini bread recipe. I'm new to soaking, would like to know how you would modify this to soak the flour portion. I also would like to try to make it with einkorn. The recipe is very straightforward. It's eggs, oil, vanilla, sugar, shredded zucchini, flour, salt, baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, fresh blueberries. It's pretty straightforward. Looks like a great recipe, and that's why I was so excited to make it myself. I actually did it twice, and the first time I ran into some issues, which I corrected the second time, so here we have a tried and true makeover for you today. Gina is asking how to incorporate soaking, first of all, into the recipe, and for those of you who may not know, in traditional cooking, we use methods like soaking to make foods, especially grains, more nutritious and digestible. And there's actually 3 methods to make grains more nutritious and digestible. They're soaking, sprouting, and fermenting / sourdough. I'm saying those in order of effectiveness. Sourdough / fermenting is the most effective in making grains more nutritious and digestible. When you're doing recipes, some of them are good candidates for one, some for the other, some for all, but you kind of have to weigh your options and what would work. So in soaked flour recipes, which is what Gina is asking to do, you combine the flour, water, acid, and you give it a soaking time that's like 7 to 8 hours or overnight, and then you proceed with the recipe. In sprouting, you would take your whole berries, which would be wheat, einkorn, spelt, whatever you're using, you soak them, then you, like overnight, then you drain, and then you rinse twice daily as you allow them to sprout. And that transformation from a locked up seed into a tiny little plant kind of essentially like breaks down gluten and neutralizes phytic acid, which is a mineral absorption blocker. And so the sprouting process makes your flour healthier. Finally, you have sourdough, and as you know, we love sourdough. And in this method, you have a sourdough starter that's an ecosystem of beneficial organisms, and they're good guys, yeast and bacteria, and they do the work of pre-digesting gluten and breaking down starch and preparing the grain for better digestion. So you have those 3 methods to prepare your baked goods when they have grains. And it really does apply to all seeds, but we're just talking about grains here. Those are the 3 methods. And Gina's recipe, and for those of you who might have old family recipes that you want to make over the way we have today, you often try to improve them in a few ways. Number 1, which is quite obvious, is just swap out the ingredients. So if it's white sugar, use an unrefined sweetener. If it's white flour, use an ancient grain like spelt or einkorn like we do. You can sift it to make it lighter, but we really do love whole grains. You would use butter instead of shortening or processed veggie oils. You would use real salt, unrefined salt instead of table salt. Those are the kind of substitutions you're making. The second way you can improve those old family recipes is by changing the method, and that is incorporate soaking, sprouting, or fermenting. And that's what Gina is asking to do. So when I looked at Gina's recipe, and I just read you all what it called for, Gina said, can you help me make it a soaked recipe? Well, to soak, that means you need a water or a similar liquid in order to combine the flour and add an acid and give that soaking time overnight, right? But I read you the recipe ingredients, and there's no water, and there's not even really any similar liquid to do that. So it's not really a good candidate for soaking. It's also not a good candidate for sourdough because with sourdough you also need water or a similar liquid for the souring stage. So all that we're left with really is sprouting. And that's not a bad thing because I actually love to use sprouted flour. And this is my container I keep on hand. You know, sometimes it's full, sometimes it's low and needs to be replaced. But these are sprouted einkorn berries. I have gone through the process of soaking, allowing them to sprout, dehydrating them, and then I just run them through my mock mill, which is my home stone grain mill. And so I have on-demand, instant sprouted flour. The flour has already had the traditional methods of sprouting applied. Does that make sense? So all you need to do is mix up your batter and bake. And I love to use sprouted flour in things like quick breads, like we're talking about today, or cookies. And often those recipes don't have water, don't have a liquid to do a soaking or a souring. So you have to do sprouting if you want to make them better. So that's why, Gina, I'm recommending to you that you actually do sprouting. Anybody who's interested, if you need instructions on sprouting, we have them in our Einkorn Baking eCourse. This is the print book companion to the eCourse, or you can also get the eBook version, or if you're a member, you have access to all the lessons in the member area. But this is where you want to look, is in our Einkorn Baking materials. We have a whole lesson on sprouting einkorn. So all the instructions all the way to milling your flour. So basically, Gina, that's where we are, is what I recommend, is to use sprouted flour. So let me tell you exactly the changes I made to your recipe. We ended up with 2 beautiful loaves of blueberry zucchini bread, and I love the color, the green zucchini and the blueberries, and it just turned out fabulous. And I did make it twice, and the biggest issue I had is that einkorn, which you're asking to do einkorn is not as absorbent. And so in a lot of recipes, if you do just, if it called for 1 cup of white flour and you use 1 cup of einkorn flour, you might have a wetter batter. And sometimes people add like a tablespoon of coconut flour or something to soak that up, or additional einkorn flour. But another way, without changing the flour to sugar ratio, to handle that is to reduce the amount of liquid. And in this recipe, the liquid came in 2 places. So one was the oil. The recipe called for 1 cup of oil, so I just used a half. And the first time I used the whole cup of oil, and honestly, I think the bread turned out a little bit greasy. And when I reduced it to a half cup, the bread is not greasy. So I think that was a great change. The second way that I reduced the liquid in the recipe is the grated zucchini. I did it at the very beginning of the recipe, and I let it sit while I did all the batter. And then before adding the zucchini to the recipe, I squeezed out excess water. And I probably squeezed out, in the 2 cups of shredded zucchini, I probably squeezed out a good 1/4 cup or more of water. And so then I proceeded with the recipe, and I used the same amount of flour as you did, except I did fresh ground. Actually, I shouldn't say I used the same, because when you do fresh ground, you need to add a little bit more. So like 1/8 of a cup per cup of flour. So I did use a little bit more flour, but I ended up with a great batter because of reducing the liquid. That was one major change I made, was to reduce the amount of liquid so the flour was right. The second thing I did was, instead of white sugar, I used coconut sugar, but you guys can also use any unrefined sweetener you want. You can even use an erythritol stevia blend to keep it lower on the sugar. And I used half as much. The original recipe calls for 2.5 cups of sugar, and I really just used 1 cup. So I even used less than a half. Our family has been eating whole foods and homemade baked goods for so long that 2.5 cups of sugar would just be so sweet for us. So you guys adjust that based on your sweet tooth. And the third thing is, so reduce the amount of liquid. Second was swap out the sweetener. And the third thing I did was I used the sprouted einkorn flour. So really I did it right in the mixing bowl. That's what's so cool about the mock mill, is I had the bowl with all the batter of the egg and sugar and vanilla and oil all whisked together, and I put it right there, and I just put my sprouted berries in the top of the mill and ran them through, and they just, the flour just came out in the bowl, and I just mixed it and proceeded with the recipe. There's a picture of that at askwardee.tv. Look for episode 1, 2, 3. So here we go. I was just going to cut into it for you so you could see it, everyone, because it really turned out fabulous. Oh, I guess I should say I did one more thing. Gina, you did yours in 4 mini loaf pans, and I just used 2 regular loaf pans. So here it is. It has a great crumb, a great texture. Has those blueberries and the flecks of zucchini. Not to make you jealous or anything, but it's really good. It's really good. And it's just mildly sweet, which is how we like it. So if you want super sweet, increase the sugar. So I made the notes and all the changes that I did and the complete recipe at askwardee.tv. Look for episode 1, 2, 3 so you can make the zucchini bread. And it's really fabulous. So thank you, Gina, for the recipe. I think this is going to be a staple in our family. I think I will make it. I served some to my husband this morning and he really liked it. Okay, so to wrap up, again, you all can submit questions to Ask Wardee by sending me an email or following the instructions at askwardee.tv. Just look for one of the posts. And if you do submit a question that I answer on the air, you will get a gift like Gina did. If you want more information on baking with einkorn, we have our Einkorn Baking resources, which includes your option of an ebook, a full e-course. If you're a member, you get access to everything for a low monthly price. Or we have the print e-cookbook for Einkorn Baking. So you'll find links to all that with the transcript. If you'd like a free einkorn recipe from me, I have my no-knead sourdough einkorn bread. If you haven't grabbed that already, you can get that at tradcookschool.com/no-knead, which is all one word, Noknead. And that's it, everyone. Enjoy your baking. Give this recipe a try. Give sprouting a try. I think you'll really find that you can do quick breads and cookies on the spot and still use traditional methods because it's already done. When you sprout the flour, you've already taken care of the methods ahead of time, so you can just mix and bake. It's so handy and it's so fun. Thanks. God bless you all. See you again next week.